Hello everybody and welcome back to another video from the Theory of Racelessness. Before the clip, we have some very exciting news. Dr. Sheena Mason, Dr. Carlos Hoyt, and Greg Thomas present Resolving the Racism Dilemma, a full-day conference coming up this September 24th, 2022. Register using the link in the description box down below to experience these leading voices as they explore and discuss how to correct the misguided notions of race. Now, enjoy the video.
Forward. I think getting to the root of the problem is really what has been a hindrance in the context of the United States in terms of transcending this thing called racism. And part of my sincere belief in eliminativism is because when I hear constructionism, and as you describe it, I hear reconstruction, but just packaged slightly differently. And I would argue that eliminativism, while it is a bit of a misnomer because it suggests that an eliminativist such as myself believes that we could actually completely eradicate the concept, thereby completely eradicating racism. And I don't believe that is necessarily true. I think if we get to a point of especially focusing on the youth and not teaching them racism in the first place, because we're all taught race, which means we're taught racism because it comes hand in hand, really. If we can get to the root of that with our young people and start to stop teaching them race and teach them about racism, but teach them about race through the properly, redirected subject of racism. Like, we're examining race as a sort of historical concept that we no longer subscribe to, or that we recognize now that we don't have to subscribe to, and actually all of us in this room are raceless. And we encourage young people in high school who've already globbed onto the American concept of race and the fanaticism and obsession with color and all of that, to de-racialize themselves. That work is necessary, and that work, I think, will go a long way toward the ultimate goal of eliminativism, because at some point, just as the majority of our society came to subscribe to this particular ideology, we can reverse engineer the same thing. We can't if we don't believe that we can, but we can. And we start with the young people, and across, a couple generations, I do think it would be eradicated. And you might have a very small percentage of people who are really intent on maintaining their racist ideas or the racist ideology, but that ultimately it would be a very small percentage of people. And we don't need every single person to be an eliminativist to achieve eliminativism, because really, as I look at it anyway, it's about the statistical majority of people being an eliminativist, and then the policies and the procedures and the ways of the land, right, will come to inevitably reflect the majority, and that over time will lead to a more absolute societal structure where, again, it's like a tiny percentage of people who are just really intent on holding on to the thing called race. I believe sincerely that we can get to that, because, and part of what inspires me and part of the work that I do through Theory of Racistness is I help people relativize the concept. When you were talking about your parents coming from Costa Rica, and you were talking about this sort of acclimation into American society and how Americans conceive of themselves and identity and race and all of that, and that was in some ways different from their experiences in Costa Rica. There are a lot of countries across different times that we can look to that have completely different concepts of race. So racism, as I spell it with the word race in it, doesn't travel if they have a concept of race at all. And where race doesn't exist, that's not to say there aren't hierarchies. Of course, there are hierarchies. You and I both know, and you've already testified to the fact that humans tend to do this to themselves and other people, right? There are hierarchies, and those hierarchies in other countries might be more ethnicity based or nationality based. In some ways, those two overlap. So I'm not talking about paradise be existing anywhere else, right? Because capital R race doesn't exist in every place. But part of the journey for people, and I think part of what it can give people hope and help people feel heartened, is the knowledge and insight that this thing that we take for granted and that we, in some ironic ways, think is objective, sort of objective reality of race. If we look, across the ocean or whatever, we come to find out that that's not how people conceive of themselves, right? And I think that means a couple of things. It means that American society doesn't have to continue to always operate in this way. And I think that it means that there was a time before America became the United States, before it became officially America, there was a time when race didn't exist anywhere close to how it exists today. And so it almost brings us back to our sort of pre-American roots. And one book that explores that idea, it's a book of fiction, is Toni Morrison's book, A Mercy, where she explores a sort of pre-American and pre-race or pre-racialization context. And I don't know, I think for all of those reasons that I'm hoping are clearer, I'm a staunch eliminativist, but I'm also a skeptic. And I don't know if Pierce talks about, does he talk about the other philosophies of race that speak to what a person thinks race is, like constructionism, naturalism, all of that?
Yes, he does, and I won't, do him justice if I try to sort of speak for him, but I will, respond to your very wise words. And just to be clear, when I speak about sort of the arc of this bad idea, it is arcing towards being eliminated in just the ways you talked about. I guess if I'm trying to create a dialogue between, my use of the correctivist approach and your desire and advocacy for eliminating the whole thing, I would say that the first facilitates the second, right? That by adopting a corrective stance to this thing that is a pretty well ingrained habit, we will eventually break the habit, right? And as you say, it doesn't mean that some folks won't still carry it. So that's one thing I want to be clear, that I have no disagreement with you about that at all. It's a process maybe issue. The other thing I would say is that the resistance to racialization, conceptually, and I think pragmatically, takes care of the problem of race and racism. But it's not just about this thing that we call race. When I talk about racialization, I always feel a little bit frustrated with myself, because I feel as if I'm inviting people to think about this super important concept in terms of just one ism, and that's racism. So, as a really brief, sort of reminder or primer, when I think about racialization, I'm talking about a process, like an action process that involves selecting some attributes of a person that we use to then distinguish that person from other people. And we know what they are in race. And then sorting people accordingly, and then attributing things to them that are baseless, anecdotal, silly, harmful, etc. And then essentializing those differences so that they can't be changed. Once you're this, you're always this, right through the generations. And then finally acting on them. That is beautifully applied to race. And when I found that concept in some law documents in Canadian government, that is the context they were being used in. But I often say, and I don't get to talk about it a whole lot, that term racialization and that process could easily be called otherization, or alienization, or whatever word just breaks it out of any particular social identity cast, right? Because it is what we do to each other. The resistance to that proclivity, is mostly what I'm talking about when I talked about correcting, because you can slot out gender for race and, sexual orientation for gender and it's just good. It keeps happening because we are so inclined to do that. And that's what I think really has to be resisted. And it's on that sort of grand level where I say it's hard to eliminate all of that, because everywhere you turn, the brain is ready, right, to do that thing that seems really logical and maybe even helpful, but can be really destructive. And you and I are talking about it particularly in the realm of race. But again, I don't want there to be any sort of confusion. Yeah, the goal is to eliminate. And I actually think the race one is on its way. And then
We hope you enjoyed that highlight. To watch the full version, use the link in the description box down below. Before we go, here's another reminder for Resolving the Racism Dilemma with Dr. Sheena Mason, Dr. Carlos Hoyt, and Greg Thomas. We highly encourage you check out the great things being offered at this conference, September 24th. All of the conference information is linked down below. We hope to see you there.